I'm going to call the Tuesday, December the 11th, 2007, the Committee of the Whole meeting to order. We have with us Councilwoman Sierra, Vice Mayor Burgess, Councilwoman Wendy Lobos, and Councilman Melvin McCormick. First item on the agenda, November 27th, 2007 minutes, tab 1.
I'll move it.
I'll second. They've been properly moved and seconded. Any comments or questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And the ayes carry. Item B, discussion on the recommendation and the confirmation vote on the MPO seat appointment. Mr. Manager?
Mayor and Council, just as a little bit of a background note, excuse me, as the city has grown and the population has reached 50,000, actually we've eclipsed 50,000, but it qualifies us for a seat on the Metropolitan Planning Organization. That organization coordinates transportation projects in the regional areas, and it's really mandated by federal government as well as the state to have the organization. Once you reach the 50,000 population, then you get the seat. The governor has to approve it. Right now, our position is in the governor's office. It's been there a little while, longer than we had anticipated, so we've got Bob Levy calling over to the governor's office, talking to the staff, see if we can't get it signed. Back down, then it goes to the Board of County Commissioners, and it's pretty much perfunctory because we've proved that we're 50,000 and are deserving of the seat. The membership of that board is all elected officials. The non-elected are advisors. A majority of the elected officials are, of course, the county commissioners. For the cities, it's the mayor. So there's only one city that does not have the mayor as the MPO representative, and that is the city of Miami, and Mark Sarnoff, I think, is on that. So our recommendation, of course, this is an important position for the city. This is really a good thing for us to have our representation there. So I think the office of the mayor is appropriate to represent us.
And I have been advised the same as well by the attorneys and the manager's staff that it should be the mayor that sits in that assumes the seat. And it's very, very important for the city, especially with transportation dollars being so important to the city at this particular time. So I'll entertain a motion at this time.
I'll move that we make the mayor the appointment to the MPO seat.
I'll second. It's been properly moved and properly seconded. Any comments or questions from council?
MPO again stands for, I'm sorry?
Metropolitan Planning Organization.
Thank you.
We can provide background information for anybody that wants to get more reading material on it, to understand it. I know there's a shortage of reading material that you've seen lately, so I don't know.
I think council needs one more piece of paper to read that. I really do.
You need one more thing to do.
Just like I need one more thing to do, but I think this is very, very important for the city of Homestead.
Mayor Bell, I have a question. How often does this board meet?
Once a month, I would believe.
And I believe there's training that I have to take in order to assume this position.
There is training available. I think the next class is in April of 2008 from an organization that does this training. I mean, you're going to be participating before that, but that's...
I look forward to that training.
At least we hope so. We get into the governor's office.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And the ayes carry. Thank you. Item C, residential building moratorium, tab 2. James?
Yes. Before you is the draft version of the moratorium ordinance that you directed our office to work with staff to draft for you, to bring back before you for your review and discussion. And if you allow me, I'll be happy to walk you through the ordinance and sort of explain it to you and entertain any questions or comments. There are a couple of things that you all will need to decide tonight on the direction that you want to go in the moratorium. that will dictate to us how we're going to proceed. The moratorium is drafted per your direction to cover the processing of development applications and land use plan amendments for any townhouse or multifamily project coming through to the city and any proposed development that's over 6 units to the acre. The whereas clauses in the beginning of the document set forth the parameters in which we're dealing with, i.e. the infrastructure, the development regulations, the future land use categories, the transportation master plan, all of those issues that we need to identify and look at for further study and review. Those set forth the basis for the moratorium. So those are all in the front of the document in the whereas clause. Let's see. Page numbers are different, so just bear with me 1 second while I get to your page numbers. When you get to page 5, the top of page 5, actually the bottom of page 4, the last whereas clause, the top of page 5, this list goes into those types of developments or projects that are not affected by the moratorium. Those are things that would be exempt. And the things that would be exempt are single-family detached residential that's less than 6 units to the acre, any development or proposed development that has received site plan or building permit approval and paid all the required fees prior to November 13, 2007. What I'm suggesting is that we make that date December, the date tonight, because there's no difference in the November 13th date and tonight's date of the 11th in regards to applications being submitted, so the latter date is better for the city. So if we go with December, it'll be better. Anything in the Northwest Neighborhood Overlay District is going to be exempt per your direction because we just got through with having a moratorium there. Anything in the boundaries of the Southwest Neighborhood Master Plan, any commercial development, any office development, any industrial development, all that's exempt. Any property that we owned and we used for governmental purposes would be exempt as well. Simple construction, renovation, improvements of individual single-family homes, those won't be caught up by the moratorium. The replacement of mobile homes or mobile home parks pursuant to Florida statute, those would be allowed. Any infrastructure for public facilities would be exempt, and anything that we've entered into a development agreement would be exempt as well. And then lastly on page 6, you'll see any improvements authorized, any administrative site plan approvals that were done prior to tonight's date, so long as those improvements don't change the intensity or density of the project. And a lot of times people will come in for small administrative site plans. I need to move this fence or I need to move this landscaping, and those are all done administratively. So as long as those things aren't changing the nature and the scope of what you all approved, those would be exempt from this as well. Now, before we get into the rest of the document, there are two issues that we need to discuss. And the first is in regards to all townhouse and multifamily development in the city. The way that this ordinance is drafted, it's very restrictive in that it covers any proposed townhouse project or anybody coming in with this townhouse project, irregardless of whether they are below or above 6 units to the acre. So you could have a townhouse project that could be at 4 units to the acre or 5 units to the acre, and the way this ordinance is drafted, it would cover you. You would be subject to the moratorium. Now, you could choose to loosen the strings on this and be less restrictive and say, if you had a townhouse project or a project that was less than 6 units to the acre, could be a townhouse, but you could let it proceed. So that's a distinction that you all need to decide tonight and direct us to draft or direct your staff on how you want to go, because that'll be how we'll go to LPA and then ultimately to you all. That's the first issue. The second issue is that the way the ordinance is drafted, I made a note to discuss this with you all. It's not listed in the exemptions, but we're proposing that anything that is within the DRI or anything that's already been an approved planned unit development, or PUD, be exempt. The effect of that is that if you're in the DRI, you're already set with the density. That's already vested, so you're not going to be able to change the density that's already been allocated and already granted to those sectors within the DRI. The same with the PUD. That density has already been set. The only thing that perhaps if you chose to include the DRI in this proposed moratorium would be if we come up with certain design regulations or design guidelines that would be applicable to all townhouses or all different types of multifamily development in the city. Perhaps some of those projects in the DRI would be subject to those new design guidelines, but as far as the density or changing the density on those properties, you're not going to be realizing that. You're not going to change that. So that's the second issue for you all to decide. Your staff has proposed that you exempt the DRI, things in the DRI or things in the PUD, which we have done before in previous residential moratoriums. And then the other issue for you all to decide is whether or not you want to cover all townhouse projects, irregardless of whether they're under 6 or over 6, or if you want to just cover those townhouse products that are only over 6 units to the acre, giving those developments who are less than 6 units to the acre, who might be a townhouse, the opportunity to proceed and not be subject to the moratorium.
Now let's open the floor for discussion. And any comments or questions for James from council?
Well, you really brought up some very wonderful points, and I think that our main point is to control the quantity or the number of housing, and I'm sorry, I was thrown for a loop with that one statement, but it's very true. If you have a townhouse or even a housing development that's less than 6, is that something that we're going to permit? Is that what we really want to control, or is it just those that are above 6 that we want to control for 1 year? You know, it's the number of the dwellings, not so much the development style is what I'm thinking.
Okay.
I guess, Mayor Bell, if I can just say, regarding that one question with townhouse less than 6 units, I'm just quickly trying to process if that would open up a loophole for anything, like would there be any negative impact on, let's say, allowing a townhouse with 6 units or 4 units per acre?
And let me piggyback off of that question. Not only a loophole, and I agree with Ms. Sierra that the main emphasis on this was controlling the density, but it wasn't just controlling the density for me. The density was a big part of it because we're talking about infrastructure. But it was, so that was the primary concern, was the density. But the secondary concern was how much of a particular product are we seeing? I mean, as a sidebar, as a side concern, that the product that we're producing on the east side has been primarily townhome for the past few years. So then another caveat, I'd like to throw one more thing in there. And in my mind and in my thinking, if somebody only has 1 acre, or somebody has a half an acre, then they could essentially put, if they have a half an acre on the east side that they own, they could essentially put 3 townhouse units there and comply. And then they could put on 1 acre 6 townhouse units and comply, because they would be under the density of 6 or less. So are we creating a loophole if there are certain types of spot acreage that when this is not unusual, we have seen this before. Yeah, we might tend to have more of that on the west side, which is exempt, but we have seen some spots like that on the east side. So that is my thinking, that is my concern. I certainly agree with what Ms. Sierra had to say, because they're throwing out the baby with the bathwater, but I also don't want to create a loophole that somebody can jump into as big enough to climb through.
Well, keep in mind that I wouldn't necessarily know that it would be a loophole. It just depends on how strict or how lenient you want to be in regards to where you want to draw the line in the sand and who you want to capture and not capture. Now, a lot of discussion that you all that we've had over the last couple of months, well, dating back to the summer, has been the issue with the density. Yes. And what is the density? And certainly anything over 6 units to the acre is going to be caught. And the way this is drafted, any proposed townhouse or any proposed multifamily development is going to be caught, even even if it's 4 or 5 units to the acre, or even 2 units to the acre, or 1 unit to the acre, or somebody might have a lot and they want to put a townhouse in, they're going to be caught. So it just depends on where you want to go with that. It is true that you have been concerned about the density, but you've also been concerned about the design regulations and the design guidelines. And so if you truly are concerned about that and you want to take a look, then maybe you don't want to let people coming in with proposed townhouse developments who are less than 6 units to the acre to proceed. I mean, that's a policy decision for you all to make, but certainly there will be a number of people who might be caught up in, who necessarily aren't the big developers, who are the smaller developers who might come in and want to develop or proceed, but will be caught up because of the way the ordinance is drafted, the moratorium is drafted.
And certainly this is really good food for thought and conversation. Vice Mayor.
Go ahead and finish.
No, go ahead.
Going back to the, on page 2 there, we talk about the water management, the capital improvements, and the comprehensive plan. What are we going to put for what I call MOEs, measures I just lost the word. Where are we going to come up with the standards for that? Who is going to set those guidelines so that we don't have, you know, in 12 months we kind of know where we stand on all these projects? Is the city staff going to come up with a set of guidelines for each one of these that will tell us if we've matched them or not, so in 8 months we can go back and look and see, and that, you know, we're not arbitrarily saying to somebody you can't build because we still want a moratorium, where we need to keep it in place. And we're not just saying that, but we can give them figures from where we are today to where we want to look as far as road projects, the water, you know, solid waste, all the departments. I think to cover ourselves as a city, I don't know or not if we should come up with where we are with each one of them and where we'd like to be before we allow this type of building to come back.
Level of service.
Right, level of service, you know, where the road projects are at, not just with the city, but with the county and FDOT, you know, on the turnpike. I think we need to take all that stuff into effect when we're setting some standards for what we're going to do here and where we would like to be at the end of this moratorium, not just at the beginning and where we are. Those are some thoughts that I've had.
And Vice Mayor, you're correct in that anytime a municipality adopts a moratorium, part of the public purpose behind the moratorium is that you have an ongoing study. You're looking at and you're developing certain classifications or categories, or you're examining the skeleton and the structure of the city in regards to its infrastructure. We already have infrastructure in place, and so what you're doing is you're stopping everything at this point and you're saying, okay, there are several things that we need to examine and we need to look at. I don't necessarily know if it's certainly good to have a benchmark in sight, and your staff and your city managers know where the levels at which we can go, because at some point you're tapped out in regards to how much water you have available, how much sewer capacity you have available, and those benchmarks are already established. But we will have to show documented efforts in the planning process if you all want to continue the moratorium any further than a year.
If I could just add, the benchmarks are going to be, at this point, if we knew what needed to go into these plans, then we would just adopt the plans. But the benchmarks are the adoption of the plans. And the purpose of this time is to study and to come up with those plans. But the point that you correctly point out is that, and James mentioned, we just can't allow nothing to happen during this time. And through the staff process, you'll have a whole process that we'll be going through where things will be presented, and we'll be talking about the transportation plan and the watershed plan. And as that goes along, at the end of this moratorium will be when those plans are adopted, and those plans are the ones that will actually, to the extent that any of these standards need to be readjusted, those plans themselves will contain those standards. But the benchmark at this moment is adoption of the plans. And that's at that point the moratorium will end.
Ms. Waldman.
I have a couple of questions.
According to the ordinance, James, doesn't it say that if this is passed, that there wouldn't be any more applications or permits issued? So wouldn't that take care of the problem of the person that maybe owns the half acre or the 1 acre?
Well, correct. What you're saying is that once you adopt this moratorium, the person who has a smaller, something less than 6 units to the acre who might have the townhouse project, they're going to be precluded. The city will not accept the application. They'll be done for a year. They won't be able to come in with a plan and say, I'm a townhouse development, but I'm not even close to 6 units to the acre. Can I go? And the answer is going to be, I'm sorry, no, you're subject to the moratorium.
Right. Well, let's take that a step further. I mean, let's just say there was somebody that had an acre of land that was zoned for multi-units. Wouldn't we deny their application request as well? If they're in that?
Multifamily would be the same thing.
So it'd be the same thing.
Right.
And another thing, if staff is recommending that these projects that I have in front of me, 750 units, to be exempt from the moratorium, is that what you're recommending to me?
No, I think the pending residential project list that was supplied to you all by staff, that's just indicating to you and showing you what is in the pipeline right now with the city.
And what are you recommending to exempt?
Right.
Besides all the commercial
right. The way that the moratorium is crafted and drafted currently, all the projects that are on that list would be subject to this moratorium.
Would be subject
to it. You have two projects that are just pending DRC. They haven't even gone to Development Review Committee yet.
Right.
You have one project that is pending P&Z, and you have one project that has already gone to P&Z, which is pending coming before you.
And the one that's in the DRI is the Palm Bella Vista?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That one's in the DRI.
Right. I'm sorry, just for clarification, if you all go with your staff's advice of exempting everything in the DRI, that particular project would be exempt. And they would be able to move forward and not be subject to the moratorium.
But would that particular project still be dependent upon us to tell them what density they can have up to 10 acres? Or would that...
Well, there are...
I know they were going to do 114 and now they're doing 102, but...
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, most of that density and those rights assigned in the DRI you've already approved way back when, and those rights have already been assigned and done. So you have very limited capability in changing that at this point.
And then the other... Well, first of all, are there any projects that's not in the pipeline? Multifamily?
Your staff works with people coming in all the time who talk about potential...
not really in the pipeline.
But they haven't come in and submitted an application but these are the ones that are actually
in the pipeline.
In development services at this very moment.
But there's not any other ones, is there, Sherry? I mean, any other major projects outside of these?
No, anybody who has come to us and have filled the application and they are multi or medium density are right here in this list.
Okay. So the answer is no, there's not any other projects that's not within the pipeline.
No, these are in the pipeline. We have other applicants that they have talked to us, but nobody else has formally given me an application.
But the answer is
these are the only ones that they have given
If I
out.
can clarify, the language of in the pipeline and out of the pipeline, I think that it's being used two different ways.
Yes.
Generally, when you talk about what's in the pipeline with respect to moratoriums, we talk about things that would not be subject to the moratorium because they've gotten so far into the process that we couldn't stop them. But here, we're talking about the small P pipeline, which are ones that are sort of moving their way through the process. But I think just to be clear, the things on the list are ones that are in the process, but that would be covered by the moratorium. There are no projects that we're aware of that are moving forward that would not be covered by that. Are there any? There are none that are
That was my question,
covered.
right.
They're all covered.
So these are the only projects that we have in developmental services right now, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And
For multifamily use.
for multifamily?
Yeah.
For multifamily. So then, if the moratorium is passed, if they came back to us and we could agree on density, then they could move forward? Yes or no?
I guess we have to get clarification if the townhouse is the way the council wants us to move forward or not.
It would be predetermined.
Yeah, the way that it's written, and the issue that James is raising is that if you leave the ordinance the way it's written, which is we wrote it as very, very strictly, then anything that had the word townhouse on it they couldn't move forward, anything at all.
Okay. But Richard, what I'm trying to, maybe I'm not asking it right. The projects, for example, the other night, the 255 townhomes, if we could have decided, if they had agreed on the 7.5, would they have been able to move forward? I'm just trying to find out.
I see where you're going. And the question,
see what I'm trying to find out?
The question is, they would not be able to move forward because it's a townhouse project, and even though they're less than 6 units to the acre, they would still be precluded because it's a townhouse development, okay? And that's the way this ordinance is written. You all have the discretion to say, if you are a townhouse project and you're less than 6 units to the acre, you can proceed. That's an option for you all to decide this evening in regards to how you want to lessen the strings on this moratorium.
So the decision we have before us tonight, we are going forward with the moratorium, that's clear. So the decision we have for us tonight is how restrictive we're going to be. If we're going to be strictly concerned with density, or if we're going to strictly be concerned with density within the product itself, and the product being townhouse and multifamily. So I think that's the question before the council tonight, just to kind of quickly summarize it. Are we going to keep it as strict as it is that what we had before us, or are we going to amend this to say strictly density only? Anything 6 or less, or are we going to include the townhouse and multifamily unit even if it's less than? So that's a decision. That's a decision for this council.
And secondly, whether or not you want to exempt those projects in the DRI.
Right. And I see the point on that, and we have been consistent in the past, in previous moratoriums, we have exempted them because they already have a designated zoning and a designated density, up to, quite frankly. And I think that James, as well as the new council, is setting the tone anyway in each part.
Right.
The site plan, that would fall within the PUD as well.
I think the issue on the DRI is the same question that you asked. If you're concerned about purely density, then the DRI, the density is going to be there. I keep talking about they have a certain amount of peanut butter that they're allowed to put on those projects.
Spread it out.
If they spread it all on one side of the bread or they spread it out, either way they have that. If you're concerned with the nature of the product, which is what the townhouses look like, then you may want to include those products within the DRI because you're concerned with the aesthetics and other things about them. But it's two sides of the same question, which is...
Well, I am going to just go out on it and say I'm very comfortable with it as it's written. And my comfort level is just the way that it's already been designed. And I would just maintain that. While I think that there's been a good point brought up that we have been concerned with the density, I think it's also the product. And not just the product, but the quantity of the product. So I think that needs to be a factor as well. So I particularly like it as it is written.
I have a question, just so that I understand what impact this answer or this question that we had before us would have. Cherie, during the past 2 to 4 years, how many applicants have come forward that have townhouses with anything less than 6 units per the acre?
I don't recall within the last couple of years I have had any applicant with townhouses for less than 6 per acre.
Thank you.
There is the question.
I want a point of clarification, if I may. We're talking about townhouses and multifamily. When you refer to multifamily, what is it exactly? It's just apartments? What about duplexes and things like that? Is that included in multifamily as well?
Allow duplexes.
We do not. Okay, because I know we have some on the
villas,
But for the most part,
cluster homes.
So it includes all of that. Okay, that was clarification for me. Thank you.
Vista is
Usually, multifamily apartments, the R3 refers to as the multifamily apartments.
Okay.
Any further comments or questions from council?
Yes, I have one more. I had a question to Richard earlier, and I will ask it again. On page 9, section B, there is an exemption that I didn't quite understand. So, Richard, if you could just give me an example of what...
All of the items under section 3 are basically protection for the city, which so that if someone has a problem with what we're doing, we have a sort of an early warning system that allows us. I don't mind getting sued. I just don't like not knowing I'm getting sued because then I can't advise you as to whether I think we have liability or not. So under here you have a vested rights section, which we've talked about in the orientations, and I know that you understand that. The paragraph B is what the question that's being asked is that if there's nothing at all that can be done during this moratorium period, nothing at all, this is not intended to catch that. So people have to be able to do something with their property.
Right.
So that they may not be able to build townhouses or multifamily, but they might be able to build sort of what we talked about. They could build duplexes. They could build what else do we...
Depending on the nature and they could come in for another rezoning, then you can do a cluster house or some other product type besides a townhouse or a multi-apartment if they have a medium density residential.
Cluster house is really the best one that we came up with, which is just another way of sort of grouping things, but they're not townhouses, so they would have an economic use of their property. There could be some circumstance that there's nothing that they could do, and this just gives us protection for that particular use. But the cluster house is the best one. I looked at the zoning code when I got down here, and so that's the best one that we came up with.
Okay, thank you.
I will entertain a motion to present it as stated, or if anybody would like to amend the motion. So
Just one clarification, Mayor Bell, I'm sorry. As it is written, is the DRI and PUD exempted?
No, it would not be.
Yes.
No, right now, the way the ordinance is drafted, the DRI is not exempt. We need to add that as an exemption.
Okay. Then I'll entertain the motion with the change.
To exempt PUDs and DRIs as part, okay.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Mayor Bell?
Yes.
We need to also change the date on page number 5 to December 11th.
Yes.
Is there a motion to that effect?
I move.
It's been moved by Councilwoman Sierra.
I'll second it.
And it's been seconded by Councilwoman Wendy Lobos. Any further comments or questions from council? And the motion stands as amended to include the exemption of anything, the PUD within the DRI.
Just one more question for James. Thank you. Again, no one would be allowed to make application for anything multifamily, correct?
Correct.
Okay, because there seems to be...
Townhouse? Well, unless they're in the DRI, because then there would be...
Well, outside of...
Right. Outside of that, if you're not in the DRI or PUD, then you would not be able to come in and file an application for a proposed townhouse or multifamily.
Exactly.
The only thing I would add to that is that there is a provision in the ordinance. The idea is to freeze things so that things don't get developed that would be inconsistent with what your final plan is. There is a provision in the ordinance and in all of these moratoriums. If somebody comes in with people can come in with a project, and if the council determines that, hey, that's exactly what we're looking at, and we don't think that that's going to be at all inconsistent with what we are going to end up with at the end of this study, you can approve those on a case-by-case basis. So, if something, if a great-looking townhouse project comes with low density that you love the way it looks, people have the ability to come in and do it, but you have the ability on a case-by-case basis to say, that's exactly what we're looking at.
And we have a classic example of that when we had the urban design guideline townhouses with the garages in the back, big front porches pushed towards the sidewalk. It was very, very beautiful. That one project was very lovely.
And if I might, just to further piggyback onto what Richard was saying, that would... A person could come in and avail themselves to you pursuant to the waiver provision, which is Section 2 of the ordinance.
Okay.
And Mayor Bell, if I just might finish. James, under C of Section 3, when a person feels that they do have vested rights, they can make an application. What is the fee? $1,500?
Yeah, it's an application with a fee of $1,500, and that goes to the city manager along with any other evidence that they have.
And then if the city manager says, no, you don't have vested rights, then they can come before council within, what, 10 days?
Correct.
Okay, so
of the manager's written decision, and then it's before you, for you all to make the ultimate decision on whether or not.
I thought that was good to have that in there. All right, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions from council? All in favor say aye. Aye. And the ayes carry. Thank you very much for a good conversation. Next item on the agenda, item D, Florida Power and Light petition and resolution of support, tab 3.
I'll move it, Mayor.
It's been properly moved by Councilwoman Waldman and seconded by the Vice Mayor. Any comments or questions from council? We do have Mr. Ferrer with FP&L with us.
Mayor Bell, just a comment. I did have lunch with Mr. Ferrer, and he did explain to me that this is quite a lengthy process. This is not something that we're passing in support and then we're going to see a nuclear plant next month or even next year. I understand that there's almost like a 10-year process, and this is just the city saying that as neighbors we do like this project and that we would support it moving forward.
Yes. And I do heartily support it as well.
And Mayor Bell, if I could just add one comment. I supported it before, I support it now, bearing that we keep in line with, what you're supposed to do with the environment and the water and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you.
I would also like to say that in light of what's happening, in the light of all current research, especially when we're dealing with the environmental impact studies on the atmosphere, remember nuclear has no emissions. It has no emissions whatsoever. So it is, at this point, it is the environmentally smart way to go. And I think that the more we can do to encourage it, as well as becoming less and less dependent upon foreign sources of oil, this is one step in the right direction. So Mr. Ferrer, I heartily support this, and I do realize this is just one peg in this great big cog in this great big wheel. So we just wish you the best.
Comment.
Vice Mayor?
I also ate with him. He gets to eat a lot, I guess, but a lot of meals. But I would just like to say, I support this, and I've shared that with him, and I just want to make sure that the public knows, that they're going to take care of the environmental issues that come up to the best of their abilities, and they're going to start some great projects down here for the education. They've got two great things they want to do to help along, and that will help the youth of this area in the future to possibly go to work out there at Turkey Point, which I think are two great things. And I would just like to say to Mr. that let's make this the best project we can, so that when other companies or other power companies in the country go forth, they come and use this project as a guidelines and say what a great project they've done, not just for themselves, but for the entire environment and communities that surround. And I know that you've given us your word that that's what you guys are going to do, and I just I hope it'll get done, I'm sure. So thank you.
It was about 2.5 years or so ago when I went out to Biscayne National Park and Everglades National Park with a big land turnover where FP&L had donated a huge chunk of property to the park system. Ramon, how big was that? It was like 900 and something acres, something along that line, and I went. It was a big celebration on how many acres and acres of land that FP&L had turned over to the park system. Can you fill me in on that? I don't remember exactly.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Yes, FPL in conjunction with our previous project.
Excuse me, Mercedes, thank you.
Can we have your name and address, please?
Name is Ramon Ferrer. I'm Area Manager for External Affairs, Florida Power and Light Company, 9200 West Flagler Street, Miami-Dade County. Thank you, Mayor and members of the council, for your support. In fact, as a result of our previous expansion, Turkey Point 5, which came online on schedule and within budget early this year, we were able to work with all the agencies involved, including the national parks, to work a mutually agreeable mitigation plan. And as part of that mitigation plan, we did transfer close to 300 acres of land to Biscayne National Park and to South Florida Water Management adjacent to the park, so it could serve as buffer. And that was recognized nationally by the National Park Service and many other agencies.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor.
Further comments or questions from council? All in favor say aye. Aye. And the ayes carry. E, Drug-Free Communities Grant, tab 4.
I'll move it, Mayor.
It's been properly moved by the Vice Mayor. Second. And seconded by Councilwoman Sierra. Comments or questions from council? All in favor say aye. Aye. And the ayes carry. F, Department of Children's and Families Stop Grant, tab 5.
I move it.
It's been properly moved. Second. And seconded. Any comments or questions?
I have a question, Mayor Bell.
Certainly.
This is an extension of 6 months. What happens after 6 months?
They start a new funding cycle after that. This is money left over in the current cycle, and I think, the SOS program where this works out of doesn't always get the credit, but when there's extra money, we're one of the programs that get that extra money every year that doesn't get expended, because they have confidence that this program, they're getting their bang for their buck, I guess I should say.
And they're such a good program.
Yeah, they're very good.
Mm-hmm. It's been proved over and over. Yeah. It's been properly moved and seconded. Any further comments or questions from council? All in favor say aye. Aye. And the ayes carry. Thank you. Mr. Manager, anything from the manager?
Yes, I'd like to announce that between the last meeting we had and this meeting with council, that we made an emergency purchase of pumps for lift station number 1, that because of the condition of the pumps, it went into a condition called moratorium. The pumps were still working, but they couldn't. They got into an area like the red zone, where you can't go into. So we had our consultants look at that, and we needed to replace those pumps quickly, because once that happens, you have a moratorium on any of the permits or anything that you can issue from the city. So it came in between. This does fall within the amount I'm allowed to do under emergency conditions, and it requires me to make the announcement at the next meeting that we have. So
thank you.
It was $45,792, by the way.
Thank you. Ms. Sierra, anything? Nope. Vice Mayor?
I'll cut it short tonight, Mayor. No, I'm good.
Oh. Ms. Lobos?
I have a question. Kurt, that incident that happened over with the gas pipe and the repair of it, did it cost the city anything?
No, this was between DDR, little headaches, but DDR and the developer and the gas company.
Okay, thank you.
We had a little police involvement there, but that's part of what we do.
For safety, especially for safety, I'm sure. Thank you.
Nothing else.
Thank you. Mr. McCormick?
No, ma'am, no comments.
Thank you. I just wanted to announce that I have interviewed all of the candidates for the Northwest seat. I've interviewed all 6 of them, and I will be making an announcement on Monday. I have also waited to do all of the committee assignments until I had decided whom I am going to choose for the Northwest seat, because I thought it would be premature to assign any committees without having that seat filled. I also have not made a planning and zoning appointment while I know we have a vacancy, knowing that we will have people who are not going to be selected for the Northwest seat that might like to put an application in for planning and zoning. So I'm trying to think a long ways out, and those are the reasons I haven't made those appointments so far, because there was some questions about that. So Monday night, there will be a lot happening. We'll have appointments for committees as well as the Northwest appointment, and then I'm sure we'll have more people applying for planning and zoning. And that's it. Thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned.